Hey everyone, it's Matt, and today I will be reading to you another nonsensical story that I wrote. This one is called the Stu Pickles Shopping Mall Mukbang Hour. And if you're not familiar with my series of nonsensical stories, these are stories that I write with the goal of making a story as strange and silly and difficult to follow as possible, so that you are either entertained or so lost that you can't help but drift off to sleep as I say a bunch of confusing things into your ears. So, I do hope that you'll enjoy this one. Without any further ado, here we go. Stu Pickles sat in a crowded shopping mall food court, his cell phone and camera propped up against a soda cup and aimed at his face from a low, unflattering angle. On the table in front of him was an incomprehensible amount of Italian food. What's up, guys? It's Stu, back again with another shopping mall mukbang hour. Today, I'm going to be eating food from a classic spot, Sapporo. Stu really meant to say Sparrow, but for whatever reason, it came out sounding more like Sapporo. This was followed by 7 seconds of humming and hawing, as if he couldn't decide what to say next. Metallica's hit song When Nothing Else Matters could be heard starting to play in the background, but it was unclear if the song was added to the video, or if it was coming from a nearby stranger's cell phone speaker. I've got 17 pizzas, 4 calzones, and 89 packets of Parmesan cheese. Let's eat. Stu then stared at the food in front of him silently. His mouth remained closed as the Parmesan cheese packets all levitated off the table at once. A moment later, the paper packets disintegrated in a burst of flame, leaving only Parmesan cheese particles floating in front of Stu like a miniature galaxy of cheese. The particles then flew gently into his left nostril. "Amen," said Stu. Stu stared blankly into the camera for the remaining 57 minutes and 23 seconds of the Stu Pickles Shopping Mall Mukbang Hour. He did not blink. He did not eat any of the remaining food. Nothing Else Matters by Metallica continued to play on repeat. The video came to an end as a small child of Vietnamese descent approached Stu's cell phone, his face blank as if mindlessly following a telepathic set of orders, and reached for the end recording button on the phone's screen. At the conclusion of this episode of the Stu Pickles Shopping Mall Mukbang Hour, the crowd viewing its premiere, which consisted of nearly 12,000 Stu Pickles packing a dimly lit sports arena, erupted into uproarious applause. Every one of these Stu Pickles had spent the entire hour of the screening utterly enthralled by what they were watching. Popcorn was munched, hooting and hollering was conducted, and by the end of the event, over 24 Stu Pickles had perished from dehydration after producing a dangerously excessive amount of drool in response to the food presented on screen. But all was well, for you see, the Stu Pickles who had perished did not find themselves in hell. They did not even find themselves in heaven. Instead, they found themselves in the rotting, mold-infested shell of a long-closed Toys R Us store, floating in an endless void that smelled suspiciously of Cool Ranch Doritos. And most importantly, this unpalatable purgatory would be their safe haven from the pandemonium that awaited the Stu Pickles that did not perish. The survivors of the Stu Pickles Shopping Mall Mukbang Hour's first screening immediately began planning a second screening of the episode, despite rumors and eventually confirmation that the next episode in the centuries-long series would be premiering in mere minutes. But unbeknownst to all but one remaining Stu Pickles, the mice living within the walls of the arena were at their wits' end. As it turns out, every single episode of the Stu Pickles Shopping Mall Mukbang Hour had premiered at this arena, and every single episode of the Stu Pickles Shopping Mall Mukbang Hour featured some version of Metallica's hit song Nothing Else Matters. Some episodes featured the original version of the song, while others featured covers in a variety of genres, ranging from country to a rare form of neoclassical power metal composed entirely of Windows 95 MIDI instrument samples, a genre typically reserved for children's cooking show background music. But regardless of the genre, the mice knew one thing: they hated this song. The mice, having been exposed to practically every big-name music group that passed through the city, hated many songs, but their hatred for Nothing Else Matters was nothing short of apoplectic. As the first screening of this episode of the Stu Pickles Shopping Mall Mukbang Hour came to an end, the mice were finalizing plans for an attack on the legion of Stu Pickles that had driven their community utterly mad. All they needed was to hear the song once more. Within 58 seconds of the first screening's end, the second screening began. The mice impatiently awaited the inevitable, like an unstoppable army awaiting the command of their leader, as the Stu Pickles Shopping Mall Mukbang Hour, episode 9034, violently reverberated through the walls of the arena once again. They listened, no, vibrated with bated breath as Stu Pickles introduced his ostentatious Sapporo order. They cringed in anticipation as Stu mispronounced the restaurant's name, and when the time for Nothing Else Matters to begin playing had finally come, not a single mouse initiated the attack plan. For Nothing Else Matters did not actually begin playing. Instead, the song The Black Hawk War, or How to Demolish an Entire Civilization and Still Feel Good About Yourself in the Morning, or We Apologize for the Inconvenience but You're Going to Have to Leave Now, or I Have Fought the Big Knives and Will Continue to Fight Them Until They Are Off Our Lands, from the critically acclaimed 2005 album Illinois by singer-songwriter Sufjan Stevens, began to play in its stead. Both the mice and the Stu Pickles were utterly dumbfounded. How could this be? How could an episode of the Stu Pickles Shopping Mall Mukbang Hour not contain the song Nothing Else Matters by Metallica? There must be a mistake, one Stu Pickles responded hesitantly. Are we being pranked? Asked another. This means war, uttered prominent members of both the Stu Pickles community and the mouse community. the Stu Pickles community for the obvious reason, and the mouse community because if there was one song they hated even more, then nothing else matters. It was the Black Hawk War, or how to demolish an entire civilization and still feel good about yourself in the morning, or we apologize for the inconvenience, but you're going to have to leave now, or I have fought the big knives and will continue to fight them until they are off our lands. And thus, after a moment of confusion from both parties, the war began. Bubbles spewed forth from 94 bubble solution-filled super soakers as the mice, amalgamated into 94 separate giant entities vaguely resembling American professional wrestler, rapper, and television presenter John Cena, but 3 feet taller, burst forth from the walls of the arena and attempted to enslave every last Stu Pickles in an individual, transparent, soapy prison. The operation was an immediate success. Unbeknownst to them until this very moment, each and every Stu Pickles was unable to break through the soapy film of the bubbles due to a hyper-rare genetic defect that altered the composition of every cell in their bodies. From a physics perspective, each bodily surface from the skin to the hair would instantly transform into a material indistinguishable from a liquid soap upon touching any sort of soapy substance. As a result, the Stu Pickles could not pop the bubbles, and would instead become a part of them should they choose to touch the soapy spheres surrounding them. Now, I'm sure some of you have questions surrounding this revelation. I'm here to answer them. First of all, why would none of these Stu Pickles choose to pop the bubbles using a non-soapy surface, such as their own clothing? Well, the answer here is quite simple. This entire colony of Stu Pickles was also, in fact, a nudist colony. None of them were wearing clothes. Do note, however, that the Stu Pickles of the Stu Pickles shopping mall Mukbang Hour fame did wear clothes, primarily for warmth, as he found the average ambient temperature of America's shopping mall food courts to be entirely too low to be comfortable. Second, where did the mice get these super soakers? You may be thinking to yourself, narrator, I was under the impression that Toys R Us, likely the most prolific provider of the popular toy, had gone out of business. Well, I'm here to tell you that the mice indeed were unable to locate an operating Toys R Us store to purchase the Super Soakers from. Instead, they bid for them all on eBay. Some of them sold for a surprisingly high amount of money. Third, wouldn't the Stu Pickles know this already if they had washed their hands even once before? Yes, but exactly 0 of these Stu Pickles had ever washed their hands. Fourth, if gravity caused these Stu Pickles' bare feet to touch the bottom inside surfaces of the bubbles they were contained in, would that not mean that the very pull of gravity itself caused each and every Stu Pickles to, in a manner of speaking, fall into the bubbles and lose their original bodily form entirely as a result? The answer to this question is yes, it did happen. Within a matter of seconds, all 11,420 Stu Pickles became visually and mandatorily indistinguishable from 11,420 large bubbles. Then 69 huge bubbles. Then one massive arena-filling bubble. For you see, because these soapy stews acted just as soap bubbles would, they quite quickly squished into one another as a result of their close proximity and combined into a smaller number of larger bubbles until only one remained. And as the minds and souls of 11,420 Stu Pickles became one unified conscious, a lone penguin carrying a boombox playing a song by the name of Come Susa Todd walked up to the massive bubble, spoke the word omedetou, or congratulations in Japanese, and continued on in the direction of the nearest Dollar General store. The mice had won, but at what cost? Well, with the purchase price of the 94 Super Soakers used in the war, averaging $22 and the massively miscalculated purchase of $9,001 of bubble solution, the cost of success totaled $11,086 and 86 cents. But something was wrong. Faintly, somewhere off in the distance, the mice could hear something. Something that sounded like a certain Metallica song. A certain Metallica song by the name of Nothing Else Matters. As the massive, bubbly, unified conscious of 11,420 Stu Pickles popped after becoming the victim of a stray bird dropping, the mice marched in the direction of this unacceptable cacophony. Meanwhile, Larry was enjoying an entire 2-liter bottle of chocolate milk. The milk was both milky and chocolatey. When it was not, however, was spicy. And this bothered Larry. To rectify this problem, Larry got into the driver's seat of his 2002 Ford Explorer, drove a few minutes to the nearest grocery store, and purchased enough sriracha sauce to flood his home 4 inches deep with the spicy red condiment. But upon attempting to return home, his 2002 Ford Explorer was not having it. It did not want to be responsible for so many bottles of sriracha sauce, so it simply grew 3 pairs of remarkably human arms and legs, stood up confidently, pried Larry out of the driver's seat and placed him gently onto the sidewalk, dumped every single bottle of sriracha sauce out of its trunk, and stomped down the road towards the nearest zoo, for it wanted ever so badly to see the toucans, and to see the toucans it did. However, Larry did not want to, and was not going to, see the toucans. Not at all. Instead, he simply wished to be back home with his 2-liter bottle of chocolate milk and unfathomable number of liters of sriracha sauce, enjoying several cups of their combined flavors into the early hours of the following morning. But how was he going to get all these bottles of sriracha sauce home? He considered picking up one at a time, walking it home, then returning on foot to continue decided that it would be best to fashion the entire backpack's worth of fruit-by-the-foot fruit snacks, stuffing his backpack to the brim into a very long, very fruity rope. Wrap this rope around each of the bottles of sriracha sauce and drag the whole thing through wind, rain, and mud all the way back to his humble abode in a single trip. And that's exactly what he attempted. Note the use of the word attempted here. I did not use the word succeeded, because that is not what he did. For you see, the only thing that could grab the attention of the aforementioned army of aggressively angry mice more than an audible performance of Metallica's hit song Nothing Else Matters was fruit by the foot. These mice loved nothing more. Fruit by the foot was their favorite snack, their favorite breakfast, their favorite lunch, their favorite dinner, their favorite stationery, and their favorite tool, and in many cases the one god in which they professed any sort of faith. And as the aforementioned army of aggressively angry mice and the chocolate milk and sriracha sauce loving Larry crossed paths for a brief, fateful moment, the crusade so superfluously detailed earlier in this story came to an end. And so did the hopes and dreams of Larry. The mice, ravenous in their pursuit of fruit by the foot, devoured 98% of it in mere seconds, much in the same way that a duck might annihilate a bowl of peas. And because it so happened that Larry and the mice had crossed paths in the middle of a rainstorm on a 19-degree uphill incline, the bottles of sriracha sauce rolled rapidly down the hill and scattered every which way into vast puddles of mud, the paths of oncoming vehicles, and in the case of one bottle, into the mouth of an alligator. This alligator was not accustomed to spicy foods whatsoever, and found the instantaneous ingestion of 28 ounces of sriracha sauce to be so unbearably hot that he began spewing a flamethrower-like spray of fire from his mouth, much like a living cartoon character. As the alligator ran all over the place on two legs, also like a cartoon character, the fire spewing from its mouth ignited the nearby sriracha sauce factory and all businesses that offered the product for sale within an 800-mile radius, burning them all to the ground and utterly eviscerating Larry's hopes of enjoying a single drop of sriracha sauce any time in the next few weeks, or perhaps a few hours should he choose to drive or take a plane far out of state into a territory where sriracha sauce continued to exist. But he did not. Larry was simply too disheartened by this obnoxiously inconvenient turn of events to even continue walking home. So there he sat, soaked by the rain on this 19-degree incline, awaiting the end of the storm and the end of the long sriracha sauce drought that had just begun. Now, some of you may be wondering, how was Metallica doing throughout all of this? Well, to answer your question, they were doing just fine. Also doing fine was the Queen of England, who happened to be viewing all of these events via drone and found each one more amusing than the last, except for the dejection of Larry. Instead, the dejection affection of Larry saddened her, for she was a very empathetic person when it came to the plight of people given names starting with L. I say was instead of is, because the Queen of England described in this story is not the same Queen of England that may currently be in power as of the time you're experiencing this story. Speaking of which, how should I end this story? I'll leave it up to you. Tell me, out loud, right now, how you'd like this story to end. Okay, any other details? Alright, well, now is the time that I'm afraid I must inform you that your input will not have any effect on the ending whatsoever. I simply wished to give you the illusion of interactivity, because I felt that feeling the power to influence a pre-written, pre-recorded story may have a sort of novelty to it, even if such a belief, and consequently such a novelty, might be painfully short-lived. And thus we continue on to the ending of this story. Dinosaurs came back. All of them. All at once. Every single dinosaur that ever lived throughout all the history of the Earth instantly appeared in the exact spot it died, correcting for elevation so that none of them would reappear below ground. However, corrections were not made for latitude and longitude, so a significant number of dinosaurs ended up fused together, as many of them died in similar spots. This did not affect their ability to live happy lives or experience independent thoughts or emotions, though. They simply accepted it as the way things were. As for the dinosaurs that appeared over what were now bodies of water, they appeared with substantial, and might I add, very cool wings that allowed them to fly over the water and back towards land without any risk of injury or death. I say that these wings were cool because they were chrome and covered in really cool flame decals. Think of a cooler dinosaur wing design. You can't. Anyway, the dinosaurs were back, and they were ready to party. So party they did. The end. And that about does it for this nonsensical story. I hope that you enjoyed what I came up with, as well as my